Hi, I'm Jeremy Farrel. I go by Jeremy K. Farrell in a lot of professional situations. I'm an autism spectrum disorder advocate, mostly freelance work. I go around, I do a lot of consulting and mentoring with the autism community. I've also worked for a lot of research. I worked for the Listening to Faces research, and for that I actually drove around the state as the leader of recruitment and community outreach. So I would go to different events, and it's really cool getting to see the state, and because of that, I think I got to know driving in a very different way and got to know it as connected to where it fits in my life. Sorry, I got a little off track there, but I tried to
Jeremy,
tie it back around.
You were awesome.
You did great.
Seriously.
Wonderful. Fear associated with driving, especially when you're autistic, is kind of just how easily things can go wrong. And right when you start driving, even in like the smallest, easiest like parking lots and stuff, you're bound to hit a curb, and it just kind of reinforces that like, oh, one small mistake and this could get very bad. And I think especially like in the early days of driving, even after you get your license, that's just a really big anxiety that's really hard to kind of get away from, because it definitely makes everything feel a little shakier. My driving experience has been really good. Because I've been able to drive, I've been able to do a lot more career opportunities than I ever would have been able to do otherwise. One of my jobs literally had me traveling the state to go to autism-related events, and I got to really connect with my community in a new way. I got to form a new job path, and a lot of really cool things happened. And I was driving hours every day for that work. Like, I would usually drive at least an hour and a half to every event.
Did your parents do anything that drove you nuts while they were teaching you to drive?
Well, yeah, but I think they of course did, but that's a little inevitable as they are not autistic, and it just, especially with the, everybody goes through this, and I know everybody hates it, but the wait, when you're already doing something right it's so painful, because you're like, how do I change what I'm doing if I'm doing it right? And especially in your autistic brain, that can cause all sorts of problems. So it can be frustrating, but at the same time, I was very lucky that my parents were very involved with me. I actually didn't take driver's ed. My parents kind of helped me the whole way. I spent like an extra year and a half, 2 years just feeling it out with them. And that actually went really well, because even though it was frustrating, at least it was at my own pace. I was 18, I believe, when I finally got my license. I started driving, I think, like halfway through 16. I kind of got into it. I was like, hey, can we maybe go try to drive somewhere? But I really didn't start like really going for it, I think, till like I had just turned 17, and then by 18 or a little after, I had gotten my license. Advice for parents with young adults with autism is definitely a little difficult, especially because everybody's so different. And I think that's kind of where my biggest advice on driving comes from in that situation, which is you really just have to let them figure it out at their own pace. Driving isn't this black or white thing. There are different types of driving. Driving on the highway is very different than driving on back roads. So I think a lot of it just comes down to letting your kids kind of figure it out at their own pace, get comfortable with it as they do. And to that effect, I think teaching them about alternatives and getting them comfortable with it is a huge part of that. Being able to feel comfortable with public transportation takes the pressure off learning to drive, and pressure on stuff that's that important can always make it harder to get through. So without the pressure, I think driving's a lot easier. I would say the thing that stresses me out most about driving is kind of the big obvious one, which is it's unreliable. The time it takes to drive one place isn't always the time it takes to drive that place. Traffic, accidents, and especially with autism, I don't think we talk about that a lot, but that's the part that always is like the hardest for me to deal with. This fact that these things are always kind of, I'm just betting, hopefully today will be okay. And especially as someone who kind of thrives on planning things precisely, that can be a lot. But a lot of the things that stressed me out when I started, like going on the highway or like long drives, I've come to actually really like, because it allows you to kind of like settle in. And once you actually get a feeling for driving, I think a lot of the things that really frustrate you in the beginning kind of just become part of the process. Particularly, I would say just aggressive drivers. I know some autistic people who are fairly aggressive drivers. I am not. I am an absurdly passive driver. I like to just be like, hey, let's just keep everything as calm as it can. So especially when somebody's like instigating and like getting mad at someone or like being like, go, and like the other person doesn't know what to do, it just, even if I'm not involved, it stresses me out so much because the thing that I like about driving that I never really expected is there's so many like rules that people follow and they just automatically follow because they're rules of the road. And when those start coming down, when you see them start falling apart, it's just so stressful because who knows what's going to happen next? It'll probably be okay. I think one of the biggest things, and I just teach this in general, is know what it means to be in your element and bring that to driving. Being in your element, being in a space where you're like, I understand everything going on, I feel comfortable is important, and I think that's why it's really important to keep track of what your car looks like, what the inside of it's like. If you like music, make sure you always have music to play. If you like having like a drink, make sure you always have that. Like, make sure you create your car a very comfortable space, because that's what's going to calm you down when you remember, oh, I'm grounded in a space I feel comfortable. I think this is actually a fun answer because my favorite place to drive these days is I used to, when I first went to college, my dad took me on this Route 34, and then I didn't go on it like ever again because I lived up at college. But then when I started commuting, I started taking that route every day, and I started taking it because that was the only route I knew because that's the one my dad had taken. And now whenever I go up to school, it's one of my favorite routes because it's just this nice like hour ride up Route 34. You pass the Seymour Dam, you're on the river, so it's just really cute. And I also just really like the idea that a drive that used to like be like the biggest drive in the world, like this is the drive from my house to college, that I couldn't even comprehend, is now just my favorite drive to do whenever I have a chance. Now that I have my license, a lot of job opportunities have opened up that simply were never there before. Public transportation in cities is great and I love it, especially in like New York or New Haven for getting to events. But a lot of, especially events with families and people on the spectrum, which is what I do for a living, a lot of that's in suburban towns. And they'll have their own little like yearly events or something. And the only way to really connect with those towns and understand what's going on there is to go there. And because I have a car, I can actually just go, hey, I have a free day, let's go and learn something about a community. And it's just really opened doors in that way, allowed me to get to know Connecticut in a way that's really important for me personally and professionally.